Hi everyone, just an impromptu live tonight. I haven't had a chance to finish the entire presentation that I wanted to do tonight, but I still thought if I chip away at the bits one by one, then it won't be such a long one. Tomorrow, when I do the full discussion of Libby's phone and the Knowledge C data. I've been chewing away at this data for the last few days, and as you know, I've spoken about a few of the things as I've had some evolving thoughts about it, but today I'm just going to simply focus on the audio output route start and end time, because that's the source of a lot of confusion. And the more I research, the more I dig, the more I find about what this potentially means and why it potentially doesn't mean what either side said back at trial. And this is important because of understanding Libby's data better. It's not necessarily something that is exculpatory or inculpatory when it comes to the case against Rick Allen. So, hi, Charles. Thank you for joining. I am going to talk about the headphone jack again. Yes. So just a quick one today, because I am in the midst of preparing to discuss all of this Knowledge C data set. I have started to feel like this has become an area of interest for me. I didn't think it would be initially, but the more research I do, the more I find out, the more things start to make sense in terms of the timeline for the girls. And I think it tells a lot of the story. So I really want to do that justice, and that will hopefully be tomorrow around the same time when I will have that presentation ready. But today I didn't have a chance to complete it all, so I thought instead that I would just focus on this detail and trying to sort of clarify and make sense of this detail with some of the additional information that I found. So it's going to be fairly brief. It's just a few presentation slides now, but tomorrow we'll go through the data set in full, not all 1,000 and so lines, but looking at some of the key lines and what they mean. But let's just dive into this audio output route start/end time and get into the presentation. Charles, happy for you to share some info with me for sure. Feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm going to just read off the presentation and then I'll come back to the chat again. Okay, so, oh, hey, Al on the Prowl, thanks for joining as well. This is just a quick one, impromptu. I'm going to do a much more lengthier one tomorrow that's, I think, going to have lots more interesting information, but this is just a short one to clarify. Okay, so I've just said Libby's phone speaks, interpreting the Knowledge C data, audio output, route, start, and end time. So Libby's phone speaks, the series that I'm working on at the moment, and I will go into more detail on that tomorrow. Hi, Donnie. Nice to see you in here again. So as always, the disclaimer and also remembering who matters here. So dedicating this to Abby and Libby, and just remembering and holding in our heart these poor, beautiful girls, and helping making sense of Libby's phone helps us to understand what may or may not have happened on that fateful day. Oh, disclaimer, guys. Yes, educational discussion purposes only. I'm not an expert in this, but I am an avid researcher, and I don't give up until I understand every detail of something I'm interested in. And at the moment, this is my hyper focus, so I've been doing that. Please don't assume that I'm trying to give any legal advice. And also, really importantly here, I'm not trying to say I know better than the digital experts at trial, but I'm trying to offer some other potential explanations or understandings from some of the additional research that I've done. So what does audio output route changed actually mean on iOS. So this is based on Apple forensics. This isn't just something I'm making up, but what it means may be different to what we think. So apparently, route equals 1 does not always mean headphones or an accessory. It simply means the output route changed, i.e., audio that was going to one place, like the receiver or speaker, is now being sent somewhere else. Now, when you go through that Knowledge C spreadsheet that we've been looking at, you'll see that there are audio output route changed entries dotted episodically in that spreadsheet. And with each one, when you look at the context surrounding it, you can start to make sense of what might be going on. Where is the output going to, or the audio output going to? What is that change? And we'll look at that one by one in a minute, but let's just go through the basics and then we can have a look at the data set. So audio output route changed according to iOS, and this is apparently demonstrated in some research by some iOS forensic analysts. You can look into this a little bit more if you're interested, but they've tested in lab conditions, and they've noted that it's commonly triggered by voicemail playback or transcription, system background tasks, wake or watchdog events. No actual screen on or touch interaction is required for this. And for instance, Siri-related daemons, voicemail syncs, or other background services may trigger route changes without user action. We're going to get to this in a minute and explain one of those that we can see in this data set relating to the Bridge Guy video itself. So it's a system level log generated whenever the iPhone's audio routing switches. For example, from speaker to receiver, or to a virtual route like voicemail playback, Siri, or notification sounds. This log line is created by iOS background daemons such as, and you don't need to know the list of them, but if you want to look into that more, that's the name: Media Servered, Core Audio, sometimes Springboard. So you're welcome to do more research if you're interested, but I just want to get the gist of this out today. So they can all trigger without any user touch. For instance, when a notification sound is triggered, message, voicemail, sync, etc., the system auto checks or syncs voicemails in the background, Siri or dictation daemons briefly initialize, or the phone is in low power recovery, so just before or after a shutdown. There can be various reasons that these events may show up, and a lot of them are nothing to do with anything that the user has performed or done. So in this case, where did the label come from? So the AUX in label was assigned by Eldridge's forensic tool, not by iOS or Apple. So my understanding of this is that it depends what tool you use to analyze the data as to what it spits out. So one can be interpreted as AUX in by a forensic tool, but it may not be interpreted at all on another tool, for example. And so it basically, what it's sort of, I guess what we're getting at here is that the one is part of the Celebrite extraction, but the forensic tool then kind of creates sort of an interpretation of that extraction. And in this case, the interpretation that was made was that this meant headphones in or out. So she saw route equals 1 and interpreted it literally, assuming it meant someone plugged in or removed headphones. And that's a common but potentially oversimplified interpretation that can be found in forensic tools and sometimes in outdated schema references. So if the tool doesn't have the most updated, I guess, references for each number that's sort of given, then it could provide something that isn't necessarily correct, I guess, or that's oversimplified, perhaps is a better way to say it. So while some forensic tools label route 1 as accessory, Apple iOS can generate audio output route change entries automatically without human interaction, as we've just said. So it's termed accessory, but that could be an outdated term, or it could be a term that is a general term for what one means, but has not specifically been applied to this iOS system, if that makes sense. So context matters. Eldridge's interpretation, while technically plausible, kind of seems potentially forensically unsound in this context because it ignores the iOS specific behavior where this routing can happen. We know that when the events we're going to discuss in a bit, the later events that caused a lot of, I guess, debate at trial, when they happen, the screen is off. There doesn't appear to have been any user interaction with that phone for many, many hours. And we're going to go into this in a lot more detail tomorrow. The phone seems to be on system power fluctuation. It just seems like that phone is not engaging at all and hasn't been for many hours at that point. The screen isn't even going on and off anymore. We're not even seeing the battery updates, but we're seeing this audio output change. And so that's really suggestive that the phone is not being interacted with at that point, that whatever triggers that is going on in the background. It seems highly unlikely that that's somebody then plugging a headphone jack in, but actually links up much better, as I mentioned in some of the previous videos, with the voicemail transcription that's going on at that time. So I guess in summation of this, the audio output route changed route equals one event likely does not prove someone touched the phone. It's more plausibly an automatic system artifact, especially since the phone, like I said, was likely off essentially, or in a very deep sleep or hibernation mode. There are no screen on or unlock events during that time, which you'd expect if the phone's being handled because we see them going all through the time that Libby's actually holding the phone earlier in the day and on other days. And there just doesn't seem to be, therefore, any supporting evidence for that. Now, it also doesn't mean that it's just a random dirt, condensation, or any of those arguments. I formerly did think that could have been the case, but I don't now think that's the case either. So instead, I think what the case is background, things that are going on in the phone. It's probably not a very technical way of describing it, that are creating this entry in the knowledge seed data. So actually, before we go into why it appears after the VG video, let's pull up that data set again just to have a little look at this. Okay, here we go. So this is that wonderful spreadsheet that I'm going to credit Yellow Jacket and All Eyes for. I think that's where it came from. Yellow Jacket's the one who posted it on Twitter, and that's how I came across it. So really, really helpful. It makes sense of Cecil's, I believe, knowledge C data, but just in a really accessible way on this spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go up, and again, sorry if I make you guys dizzy scrolling up the screen to find some of these events. Actually, we'll go find audio. Now, I don't want to find the last one yet. We'll go to that one later, but I want to actually just go back up to the top of the data set where it first starts to show. Okay, so we can see here at the top, we've got, this is obviously not the day of the crime, but we can see here that we have an audio output route start time event happening here. This is on the 12th of February at 3:04. Now, let's see if we can kind of decode what might have turned that on. Well, it seems to link in with Snapchat use, but it doesn't seem to go off again. Let's have a look. Let's go down to the next one and see where it is. Is that the same one, guys? Oh, yes, it is. Sorry, it's just the same line. It's just the next part of the line. And then we've got it end time at 5:25. So when did it start? It was 3:04, and then it says it ends at 5:25. Who knows? I mean, do we think in that case that Libby's got headphones in for 2 hours while she's using Snapchat, and presumably was she with Abby that day? Yes, because it was the day before. So, I mean, that seems unlikely that it's headphones then. Potentially could be, but it does seem a little bit unlikely. Okay, let's go to the next one. So the next one is here. It's at 5:40. We've got a start time. And can you see there, if you look on the lines just before it, can you see it's Siri activated, Siri deactivated, and then we have audio output route start time and quite quickly audio output route end time. So you can see that correlates with the Siri activation, which is exactly what we're saying in the slides. That's one of the Apple or the iPhone changes that can lead to this audio output route change, if that makes sense. So Siri activates audio, and so it's gone on and it's gone off, and you can see that very much seems to go with the Siri activation. Now, Siri's not talking to them clearly here because it looks like it's just activated and deactivated, but I guess, when Siri activates, you get that tone, that noise. That's probably what's going on here with the audio. Okay, let's go to another one. That one's a really good one to sort of prove the point we're making, but let's look at another one. Okay, so here we've got one that's correlating with House Party app. Now, I don't know the House Party app, guys, but I believe it's some sort of video chat app or something, isn't it? So again, I mean, yes, somebody could say, well, did she put headphones in to listen to that? Again, remember, she's with Abby that night and believe some other friends too. So it's highly unlikely she's putting headphones in. And you can see it goes start, end, and it seems to correlate again with the House Party app. And then interestingly, notice how it ends. And it ends when we've got an outgoing telephone call. So that audio reroutes again. So you can see again how it's not really pairing necessarily with what looks like headphones. Again, we can't be sure. Let's look and see if there's any more. Okay, so here we go. Now we've got this event. This is when the girls are in the car about to get out of the car. And interestingly, again, look, it correlates with the time of the call to Derek German. Now, I wonder here whether this is an audio output going to Bluetooth perhaps in the car with Kelsey, or whether it's to the call itself, I'm not sure. But then what you see here again is the end time straight after the call as well. So it's linked to that phone call. Now, again, you could say, well, did she put headphones in to call her dad? I think that's unlikely. I think it's more likely that it would connect to the car's Bluetooth and then disconnect. So again, that's a different audio pathway. And I think the next one's probably going to be the bridge guy video. Yes. Okay. So this is the next one that we see. And this is here. It starts 2 minutes after the bridge guy video ends. So let's go back to the slides to see if we can figure out why that is, or to discuss why I think that might be. I've lost the slides. Oh dear. Where are they? Here they are. Okay. So why it appears after the bridge guy video. It doesn't mean, again, that someone plugged in or removed headphones, particularly because we all see the end of that bridge guy video. It's like the girls sort of jolt into action. So it's highly unlikely then that there's a fiddling around with headphones and plugging them in at that point where they're scared and they're being potentially commanded by a man who's threatening with a gun even. It's highly unlikely that's them then fiddling around with headphones. Instead, the sequence suggests the phone likely began a background process. And in this case, I don't actually agree with this. I don't think it's voicemail or audio daemon cleanup, but actually something else. Let's go to the next slide. So the sustained route duration matches background video processing, not playback or headphone use. So this to me is more likely rather than voicemail. There's no voicemail at that time. I think I've got confused with some other stuff. Again, guys, ChatGPT, we'll blame it on that. So on iPhone 6 era hardware, a video could take several minutes to fully transcode and save. And if the camera app was killed mid-record, iOS keeps the audio session open until the write completes or times out. So 5 to 6 minutes typical. And the end timestamp here is about 6 minutes later, just under 6 minutes later at 2:20. It corresponds exactly to when the system finishes and releases resources. So what this is suggesting is that when the bridge guy video ends, it probably ends abruptly, as we've all seen. It looks like it looks like Libby accidentally ends it in sort of the franticness and the stress, because I think she had every intention to keep recording. I think that was her plan, was to continue to record and to either maybe send that information to someone to get help, or to basically leave that evidence on her phone. I mean, I think at that point, maybe she believed they were being kidnapped. And so hoping that, yeah, they have some sort of record of where they're at, right? So I think what's happened is that, the camera's gone off in that flurry, and, we know then there's a screen unlock attempt quite soon after that. She's probably trying to, restart it again frantically, but she just can't. And things change very quickly after that. So the audio output route event likely represents iOS media daemon activity completing the bridge guide video save. The timing, which is 2:14 to 2:20, perfectly fits post-recording finalization duration on iPhone 6 hardware. So this is just a little bit of a timeline. If, again, we looked at that data line by line, the screen goes on, and this is very likely via the lock screen camera shortcut. We know that the phone doesn't unlock again after 2:07, and so it seems as though this is Libby covertly recording a video, and that's a bridge guide video. So I do believe that she was scared and freaked out and wanted to ensure, as this man started closing in on Abby, that she covertly recorded him. So the next thing is the video starting, and we notice that, again, that aligns with the next line in the data at 2:13. And then we notice at 2:14 and 34 seconds, so 43 seconds later, the video ends. The video stops recording, and there's no intervening unlock event or user-ended metadata. The camera session simply ends abruptly after 43 seconds, meaning it ended suddenly, not a normal manual stop from inside the camera app. And then we have this audio output route starts. Now, I know initially when I looked at this, I was like, well, wouldn't the audio output start when the video started recording? No, because this is not necessarily the audio for the video itself. This is the system finalizing the file and releasing the audio path. It's kind of what's the word? It's like background processing, as I've written here, of the video file. It's not playback. It's not user activity. Nobody's making it happen. Okay, so yeah, that's all the presentation slides. I hope that makes sense. Let's actually now again go back to the data and then look at those key entries that are the 5:45 and 10:33ish, and let's see if we can apply this and understand what might be going on there. Now, some of you will already know because you've watched some of my other stuff about this, but for those of you who haven't, or anyone who wants to look at it again, you can follow along. So if we go down to the later entry, right, so I'm just going to scroll down a tiny bit, and we see this is the entry in question, the one that was considered by Eldridge to be an indicator that headphones are potentially plugged in, and it was considered by Cecil that potentially this is when dirt impacts the phone or water impacts the phone. And neither of those answers seemed to be perfectly explanatory. They didn't really make a lot of sense. And so I thought, let's have a little look. Let's try and understand, what is it linked to? Now, some of us would think, well, is it linked to this call here? And that would be, that seems like a reasonable conclusion. I mean, look, they're within 1 second of each other. But I think what we've noticed as well with this audio output start time is that it doesn't seem to go at exactly the same time as the event. Actually, let's go back for a minute. I just want to go back to the one earlier when she's in the car. Sorry, guys. I know this is a bit of clipping up and down. So in this case, we do have it earlier. So this is the audio output route start time, and then the outgoing call. But this sort of syncs up with maybe like the 9-second pause would be maybe dialing that number. Then she has the call, and then the audio end time is a few minutes after the call. Is that right? Yeah, 4 seconds. Sorry, not a few minutes. 4 seconds after the call. Okay, so it kind of continues a few seconds before and a few seconds after. Right, now let's go back down to that last entry. So in this case, we could say, well, is that just 1 second before? But remember, she's not making the call. This is an incoming call. So again, I mean, it's possible that the phone could be sort of switching on for this incoming call. But we're going to talk about this a little bit more over time tomorrow, but I think it's highly likely that a lot of these calls are just going and diverted straight to voicemail. I don't necessarily think that they're ringing, but what does seem to correlate with this is this here, the voicemail 7.AMR. So that is a 26 duration voicemail. There's an entry at 5:25. There's an entry at 5:36, and then there's another entry down here at 5:45 and 33 seconds. It says transcript of voicemail. So you can see that this audio output route start time seems to correlate very well with this voicemail and the transcription of voicemail. And as I mentioned before, that is one of the audio output route changing items or things that can impact the change in audio output in iOS, if that makes sense. So that would be a pretty high possibility of what might have generated that audio output change. It would map quite well onto that. So if we go down, why does it then take so long for it to stop again? Well, what you'll notice is that at 5:45, the screen goes off. And prior to that, you can see the screen does come on and off at various points, even in this. I'm pointing at the screen, and no one obviously can see me pointing at the screen, but I'll use my pointer here. You can see there's lots of these screen offs, screen on, screen offs. But you'll notice that after 5:45, there's none, right? There's none. It's just blank. And I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow when we go through looking at all of this data as a full picture. But I think that's the time when effectively the phone is off. Now, it still has some background murmurs going on, as we can see. There are some things that do kind of seem to register here and there. Some of those can be delayed artifacts, so they could be logging on the server level but not necessarily showing up on the handset until later. Knowledge C can't always tell, or can't necessarily tell, if something was logged at the time or if it's an artifact that is logged after the phone's turned back on again, if that makes sense. So for example, that voicemail here, voicemail 16, for example, at 7:25, may never have registered on the phone at that time because the phone may have been dead or off or out of range. But because it registered in the server, when you switch the phone back on and it's got charge, that could straight away sync and be part of that data set when they extract it, if that makes sense. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. But you can see after 5:45, there is nothing else going on this phone. There are no more screen on and offs. There's no more battery updates. Essentially, this phone looks like it's pretty much off. And an off phone can still be, as I said, logging some of these events, and it can still be pinging the tower with its last known location, but it doesn't mean that it's actually on. Again, I'm going to explain that in more detail tomorrow because I think I'm butchering it right now because it's complicated for me. It's not my area of expertise. So you can see, though, that something changes. Up until that point, we've got all of these screen on and offs. The phone is definitely battling from about 2:41. It's really in a deep sleep mode already because we're not getting the battery changes anymore. and we don't get any actual voicemails after a certain point. But what we are seeing, or as in voicemails that actually have information in them, there's a lot of zero voicemails. But what we do have is still the screen going on and off at intervals. And then at 5:45, it completely stops. And it doesn't switch back on again. So I think that the audio output route start time and end time that we see in this later stage after the phone is inactive is highly likely to be related to this transcription of voicemail. And I think the reason that Eldridge may have interpreted it as headphones as an accessory could be to do with it's one plausible explanation, but it's not the only explanation. And I don't know Eldridge, and I guess I probably should have looked at a little bit more of detail in terms of her experience. But I guess it seems like some of this research that I was referencing before is iOS specific, experts who have done these lab studies and looked at the various reasons for this audio output routing. And I don't know if that's something that would be done in this forensic analysis with the tools that were used. I think it only really became clear for me when I looked at the data line by line. And I don't know what forensic analysts do. I mean, there's a lot of data here. They have their tools and their ways of analyzing it, but it's the context that helped me to go, I wonder if there's something else that triggers this audio output routing. And when I looked at this in more detail, that was when I sort of saw these correlations. So, as I said again, guys, I'm not trying to say that I do know better than the experts. I know it probably sounds like I am because I'm here suggesting that this is a more accurate way to analyze the data than what Eldridge did. But it's just a suggestion. It's just another layer. It's just another potential of why we see that. It's not a foregone conclusion, but I think it makes sense. Now, why would I be bringing this up? Because as we all know, I am very much in support of Rick, and I do believe he's factually innocent. The reason I'm bringing it up is because whilst it goes against the defence's case in the first trial, I don't believe this is a piece of information that was necessarily helpful. I mean, at the end of the day, Rick was found guilty. I don't think that this was particularly compelling evidence saying, somebody meddled with the phone in the evening and therefore it can't be Rick. I just think that it's better for us to have a clearer understanding of Libby's phone and the information on it so that we can make a clear timeline or a clearer timeline of what happened that afternoon and evening. And so also I'm not someone who's going to turn away if I see information that is not logical, even if it's in favor or not in favor of the person I support. Now, I don't believe we need this information to prove Rick's innocence. I believe that there is much better information in a Knowledge C data set to help with that, as well as a whole heap of other information that helps, as we've talked about over the past few months, and many people have talked about over many more months than I have. So this is just something to clear up, though, because I always sort of say if we speculate a lot about things that aren't relevant, then it's taking us away from the key stuff. And I think when everything starts to become potentially a conspiracy or tampering or suspicious, then I worry sometimes that we could lose credibility with the people who don't believe Rick is innocent, the people who don't know anything about the case. So I know for me personally, when I came into this case and heard it's a conspiracy, straight away my kind of skepticism shot up. And it took me a while to look at and understand why something in this case could potentially be tampered with or conspiratorial. I just think if there's too many layers of that, it feels too much like, a Mission Impossible movie or something, as opposed to to something that people would be able to say, well, that's plausible. Maybe that is what happened. So, yeah, personally, I don't believe that the phone has been moved or handled after the girls have been murdered. And as I said in the last few videos, I hate having to even talk about this part of the case. It's actually really the worst part, but it is so important. So tomorrow's video, I'm going to go through what I think in that data set really is helpful for us understanding the timeline and debunking the confession, Rick's confession to Wala. I've kind of touched on it already in the 7-minute pause narrative that I've been talking about, but I think there's more to it, and I want to kind of pull it all together, tie up some of the loose ends, and have a really compelling understanding of that knowledge C data and a compelling narrative that goes with it, looking at all the context and information together. So I hope that'll be interesting, because it's been really interesting for me personally, looking at all of that and trying to decode it all. And yeah, I think there's so much rich material that can come from just looking at that spreadsheet. So again, thank you, Yellow Jacket, if it's you who put together that spreadsheet. I think it was. It's been so useful, much easier to read than the Cecil report, and given so much rich data, I think we can get a much better idea around the time of death, around the time that the girls crossed the creek. And I think those two pieces of information can be helpful, definitely, for making sense of this case and understanding what happened. So I know maybe today's video is not super in line with a lot of the other stuff that I've been doing, and it's definitely not in line with a lot of the people who are pro-Rick, but I hope that it's something that people will consider and discuss with me. If you don't, I've had a few people who've had a bit of back and forth with me about this in a really respectful way, and I think it's been really useful. It's helped me to, again, further clarify and try to understand it. And I think now we're kind of at this stage where I'm probably not going to go into it again, but I think it's useful information for people to have a look at. Anyway, it's late here. I'm going to just have a quick look in the chat. I know everyone's been super quiet through this one, but if anybody did want to say anything, I'll just give you a couple of minutes if anyone's there. No, I think everyone's just lurking and listening. I haven't updated the site with a lot of these slides, guys, because I've been working on too many at once, but I will pop them on the website on the Rick Allen Justice Project. Hello, New Social Imageries, one of my very favourite people who subscribes to my channel. You're the best. Nice to have you here, but I'm not sure that you should be here right now. Who knows? Okay, guys, I think I'm going to finish up, but everybody have a great night, day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and stay tuned tomorrow for the full breakdown of the Knowledge C data. Bye.